At 5:50 in the morning, Sullivan's Island was still half asleep. Adelaide Ramsay opened the front door of the small wooden house where she had signed a marriage license the night before, and she stopped. On the porch stood the man she had married 12 hours earlier, Weston Hale, a widower, a clock repairman, a man who, by every public record she had pulled before signing, had $840 in his checking account. Behind him, stretching the full length of Middle Street across 3 blocks, stood 99 luxury cars, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Maybach, Bugatti, each one with a driver standing beside the rear door, each driver holding a leather briefcase. Weston extended his hand toward her, his voice level and calm. "Adelaide, we have a meeting in Charleston at 10. Adelaide did not take his hand. She stood on the porch with her palm still resting on the doorknob, and she looked down the length of Middle Street, and she counted. Not to 99, just to 10, then to 20. Then she stopped counting. The cars were silent. The drivers did not look at her. They were waiting. "Who are you?" she said. It came out flat. Not a question, a demand. Weston did not answer at once. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he has been preparing to see for a long time. The woman who 12 hours ago had walked into his small wooden house with a single overnight bag, signed a piece of paper, and spoken fewer than 10 sentences to him in total. The night before came back to her in quick, clean pieces. The 3 of them seated around the old pine table in his front room. Herself, Weston, and an older man named Reverend Tobias Finch, a retired minister who lived 2 streets over, a friend of Weston's father from their Navy years. Finch had a clergy license registered with the state of South Carolina, which under state law made him sufficient to officiate and to serve as the required witness. "State law requires 1 witness," Finch had said. "I qualify." She had signed, Weston had signed, Finch had signed. 8 minutes from the first signature to the last, Finch had folded the license into an envelope, shaken Weston's hand, and left without another word. Weston had shown her to a small room at the end of the hallway. "This is your room. The door locks from the inside. I sleep on the couch. Posey is in the room next to yours. She's asleep. She doesn't know anyone new is in the house." Adelaide had not asked questions. It was the first night. There was too much. She had locked the door, sat on the edge of the narrow bed, pulled out her phone and read the message from her Uncle Thurman. "Done. Share transfer agreement will be sent to you in the morning. Sign it, and by next week you'll be free of all of this." She had turned the phone off. At 3 in the morning she had gone to the kitchen for water. Weston had been awake, sitting at the table under the yellow lamp, a stack of brown leather folders open in front of him, a second cup of coffee beside a pencil that had been chewed at the eraser end. He had closed the folders when she walked in. "What are those?" she had asked. "Tomorrow." She had not pressed. Now she stood on the porch, and the 99 cars waited. And Posey Hale, 8 years old, appeared at the top of the stairs behind her, clutching a dog-eared copy of Agatha Christie's The Mysterious Affair at Styles, with 3 different fabric bookmarks sticking out of the pages. Adelaide turned back to Weston. "How long have you been preparing this?" 4 years. The answer was so short she had to repeat it out loud just to hear the sound of it again. 4 years. "Your father wrote me a letter 4 years ago. I started then. The signatures you're going to see were gathered over the last 11 months. Last night was the last night we needed." Adelaide took a step back into the house. Posey came down the stairs slowly, one hand trailing along the banister, the other still holding her book, her eyes very wide as she looked past Adelaide at the line of cars. "Miss Adelaide," the girl said, quiet. "In the books, this part is called the reveal. It's when the detective tells everyone what they missed." Adelaide turned and looked at Weston, still standing at the gate, patient, both hands loose at his sides. She picked up her coat from the hook by the door. She picked up her bag. She walked to the threshold. Before she stepped down off the porch, she stopped. "I haven't agreed to come with you." "I know. I'll stand here until you do." She stepped down. Weston walked her slowly along the row of cars. Posey followed 3 paces behind, writing in her notebook, her lips moving as she copied out the make and model of each car. 99 drivers, Weston said. Each one represents a company, former partners of Ramsey Coal, or major clients of Calder Shipping. Calder is the principal competitor of Hale Maritime. "Hale Maritime," Adelaide said. Weston stopped beside the first Rolls-Royce. I've been the silent chairman of Hale Maritime Holdings for 3 years, third largest maritime shipping group in the American Southeast. I inherited it when my father passed in 2019. I kept the ownership structure private because my wife was dying and my daughter was 4, and I didn't want a corporate headline near Posey's name. Adelaide stopped in the middle of the street. A small breeze came up off the beach and moved the leaves of the palmetto across the road. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Your uncle has been selling Ramsey Cole's shipping route data to Calder since 2022. I know every transaction. I know the dates. I know the dollar amounts. Last night, while you were sleeping in the room down the hall, each of these 99 companies canceled their contracts with your uncle or with Calder and signed new contracts with you as the largest legitimate shareholder of Ramsey Coal. With me, your shares are 34%. With these 99 contracts, you are the effective controller of the freight flow across the entire Southeast. Your uncle woke up this morning and his company was hollow. That is why he is calling a board meeting at 10. The driver of the Rolls opened his briefcase and handed Adelaide a folder. She opened it. Fresh signatures in blue ink. Real company seals. A notary stamp dated yesterday evening. The second driver opened his briefcase. The same. The third. The same. The fourth. The same. She walked the length of the line. Every briefcase opened at the right moment. Every folder ready. At the 50th car, she stopped and turned back. You knew I was being forced to marry. I knew. I agreed, because it was the only way your uncle would lower his guard. He believes he's punishing you. He's opening his door. And Posey. Was she part of the plan? Weston looked at his daughter, then back at Adelaide. Posey was never part of any plan. She's the reason I moved slowly, not the reason I moved. Adelaide felt something shift in her chest that she could not name. For the first time in 36 years, she understood, with the sudden clarity of cold water, that she had been chosen, not purchased. Her phone rang in her pocket. She pulled it out. Thurman. His voice came through shaking. Adelaide. There are 99 cars blocking the front of the office. What is happening? She looked at Weston. He only waited. She lifted the phone to her ear. Uncle Thurman. I'll be at the office at 10. Convene the board. She ended the call and handed the phone to Posey, who held it like a small, important object and tucked it into the front pocket of her pinafore. Posey wrote in her notebook, Miss Adelaide's voice doesn't shake anymore. Back inside the house, an hour before they had to leave, Weston spread the brown leather folders across the kitchen table, the same ones he had been reading at 3 in the morning. Each page was evidence. Thurman selling Ramsey Coal route data to Calder Shipping. 3 years of it, dated memoranda. Wire transfers laundered through 2 shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands. One of the contracts involved the transport of defense-related equipment under a federal carrier agreement, which meant the disclosure alone could trigger federal charges beyond anything the company itself could pursue. Enough for a conviction, Adelaide asked. Enough. But you decide when. It's your father's company. I'm not going to take that decision away from you. Adelaide was silent for a long time. Posey had gone quietly into the living room and was arranging her books on the coffee table by color. He's been gone 11 years, Adelaide finally said. I always believed Thurman would protect it. My father trusted him. I trusted him because my father did. Weston placed an envelope in front of her. Inside was a handwritten letter from her father, addressed to Weston, dated 4 years ago, 1 month before her father died. She read it. Her hands shook. Her father had known about Thurman. He had written to Weston, the son of an old Navy friend, a man he had met twice at a reunion and once at a funeral, and he had asked him to watch over Adelaide if a day came when she needed someone standing beside her. The letter ended with a line she read twice. She will not know it at the time, but she will know it later. He knew. He chose you. Weston nodded. I didn't accept right away. Elena had just died. I told him I had nothing left to give anyone. Your father said, that's exactly when you'll understand Adelaide. Posey came in holding her notebook. Miss Adelaide, do you like strawberries? I'm asking because I'm planting some this week. There's a bed in the back by the fence. Adelaide laughed. A small, startled laugh. The first laugh in many months. Yes, I like strawberries. Good. I didn't want to plant them if you didn't. That would be inefficient. Weston watched them. He did not say anything. But the moment Posey smiled at Adelaide, something inside him loosened for the first time since the funeral, and he had to look down at the table for a few seconds before he trusted his face again. 9 o'clock. Adelaide's phone rang. Corinne Vasquez, her father's old executive secretary, still at Ramsey Coal after 28 years. Adelaide, your uncle just called an emergency board meeting. Be careful. He's not coming alone. He's bringing 2 outside counsel. And, honey, he's bringing the Calder file. Whatever he thinks is in it. Adelaide ended the call and looked at Weston. You'll come with me. 1 car is enough. 98 of them are already on their way back to their companies. But 1 stays. The Bentley at the end of the line. To take you in this morning. Why 1? Because you need to walk into that office in 1 car, not 99. You enter that boardroom as Adelaide Ramsey, not as someone escorted by 99 drivers. The symbolism of 99 cars was for your uncle. It has done its job. What happens inside the boardroom is yours. She nodded slowly. It was the first moment she understood him completely. This man had not come to make her a symbol. He had come to return her to her own place, and then step back. Posey reached up and took Adelaide's hand. Just for a second, then she let go and ran to find her shoes so she could come part of the way. The 42nd floor of Ramsey Coal Tower looked out over the Charleston Harbor. The boardroom was all glass, and the light coming off the water that morning was hard and bright. Thurman sat at the head of the table. 12 board members flanked him. 2 outside attorneys in dark suits sat behind him with file boxes at their feet. Adelaide walked in with Weston half a step behind her. Thurman smiled the thin smile he used when he thought he was about to win. Well, the clock repairman attends a shareholder meeting. Charleston is full of surprises. Weston did not answer. He walked to the table and placed a folder on it in front of the board. 3 contracts, signed by Thurman, dated over the past 3 years, addressed to Calder Shipping. Mr. Beaumont, the longest-serving board member, a man who had been hired by Adelaide's grandfather, picked up the top page. His face lost its color in stages, like a photograph developing in reverse. Thurman, what is this? Forgeries. Weston spoke quietly. Authenticated by 3 independent forensic firms. The firms' names and contact information are listed on the cover sheet. You may call them directly from this room. Thurman hit the flat of his hand on the table. Adelaide has not signed the share transfer agreement. The 90-day marriage condition is not complete. She has no authority to bring outsiders into this room. Adelaide's voice came out like iron. I did not bring an outsider. I brought my husband. Under Article 7.3 of the Corporate Charter, the spouse of an inheriting shareholder may attend in an observer capacity during any session that concerns that shareholder's inherited interest. Beaumont nodded slowly, reluctantly, because Beaumont was a man who followed the charter even when he did not like who was citing it. That is correct. Thurman opened his mouth to continue, but Weston placed a second envelope on the table. Internal audit extract from Hale Maritime's Compliance Division. Unusual flows of money out of Thurman's personal accounts into the same 2 Cayman shell corporations named in the Calder contracts, $47 million over 3 years. Through the glass wall that separated the boardroom from the corridor, Corinne Vasquez was standing very still. She met Adelaide's eyes through the glass and gave one small, deliberate nod. Adelaide understood. Whatever Corinne had been holding back for years, she was ready now to put it down on a table where other people could see it. Thurman demanded a recess. One of his attorneys leaned over and whispered something to him that made his jaw tighten. The board agreed to 30 minutes. The room emptied in an uneven flow. The outside counsel moving fast. The directors moving slowly, 2 of them making eye contact with Adelaide as they passed, small nods that meant more than any word. In the hallway outside the boardroom, Thurman stepped into their path. His voice dropped low, tight. You think you've won. You don't know what I have on your father. Weston took 1 step forward. He put himself between Thurman and Adelaide. He did not threaten. He did not speak. He only stood. Thurman took a step back, then another. His eyes flicked to Weston's hands, which were loose at his sides, then back to his face. Something in what he saw there made him turn and walk the other way down the corridor, shoulders pulled in, his 2 attorneys trailing after him, as if they had just noticed how much floor they had to cover. In the elevator going down, Adelaide's hands trembled at her sides. Weston did not touch her. He stood close enough that she knew he was there, and far enough that she knew the choice was hers. Between floors 30 and 20, she let out a breath she had been holding since they walked in, and the sound of it filled the small metal car, and she did not apologize for it. Evening. The wooden house on Sullivan's Island. The drive back from Charleston had taken an hour, and neither of them had spoken for most of it. Posey was on the floor of the front room, drawing on a large sheet of butcher paper with 3 markers fanned out beside her. 3 figures holding hands. She had written their names above them: Beau, Posey, Miss Adelaide. Then she had crossed out Miss and written only Adelaide. Adelaide walked out the back door to the beach. The sand was cool through her shoes. She did not take them off. Posey followed at her own pace, stopping to pick up shells, and finally handed her a perfect white one with a single faint line down its spine. My mother used to say when you find a white shell, it means someone's about to become a friend. Adelaide held the shell tight in her palm until the ridges pressed into her skin. Posey waited a moment, then ran back up the dune toward the house, and Adelaide stayed a while longer with the shell and the sound of the waves. Back inside, Weston was making tea. He did not look up when she came in. He only slid a second mug across the counter toward the place where she usually stood. What did he say about your father? I don't know yet, but I'm afraid. Weston was quiet for a long moment. He kept his eyes on the kettle. When Elena was sick, I thought the world was going to collapse. It didn't. It just stopped looking like what it used to look like. The kitchen still had dishes in it. The yard still needed mowing. Posey still needed breakfast. Whatever it is you're afraid of, you will live through it. And you don't have to live through it alone. Adelaide looked at him. No one had ever said that to her before. Not in those words. Her father had loved her, in the way busy men love daughters, but he had not been a man who said things like that. Her mother had died when she was 9, and the grief in the house had been handled by lawyers and housekeepers. She did not answer. She only put her hand on the counter near his, not touching. Close. Close enough that if one of them moved half an inch, the choice would already have been made. Weston did not move his hand away. He did not reach for hers either. He poured the tea. Posey had fallen asleep on the couch with a book on her chest, her mouth slightly open. Weston carried her to her room. When he came back, Adelaide was standing on the back porch with her arms wrapped around herself. Under the Sullivan moon, with the ocean slow and dark behind them, they stood side by side in the quiet. The silence between them was heavy and warm. A fishing boat passed far out on the water, its running lights a small green and red pair against the black. Do you know what's strange? Adelaide said very softly. This house is smaller than my office. But I breathe better here, because no one in this house wants anything from you. She turned to face him. You don't want anything. I want you to be safe. That was the only condition I gave your father. There was no other. He asked me if I wanted anything for myself in return. I told him a man who wants something in return shouldn't be the one you ask. Inside, Weston's phone buzzed on the counter. He went in and picked it up. Corinne Vasquez. I have the original addendum to your father's will, not the version Thurman filed. I've been holding on to it for 7 years. I'd like to bring it to you in the morning. The next morning, Corinne came to the wooden house carrying a small metal box locked by 3-digit combination. She sat at the kitchen table. Her hands were steady, which surprised her. She turned the dial slowly, and the box opened with a click. Inside was the original addendum to Adelaide's father's will. The real one, signed in his living handwriting, witnessed by 2 of his hospital nurses 3 days before he died. There was no forced marriage clause anywhere in it. The clause requiring Adelaide to marry before her 37th birthday or forfeit her shares to the board had been added later by Thurman, after her father's death, using a forged signature overlaid on a blank page. Corinne then placed one more item on the table, a photograph, taken recently, of Thurman inside a private attorney's office, bent over a document, with a fountain pen in his hand, his shoulders rounded in the precise way a person rounds them when they are copying a signature. Posey took this, Corinne said. Adelaide's head lifted. Posey came in from the hallway, her notebook in her hands, and climbed onto the chair next to Adelaide, as if this were a long-scheduled meeting. I read Agatha Christie. I know when grown-ups lie, they touch their neck. The night you signed the paper at our table, Uncle Thurman wasn't here. But I saw his picture on the internet when I looked up your company. I knew his face. 2 days ago, Beau took me to his lawyer's office downtown. I went down to the lobby to buy water from the machine. I saw Uncle Thurman walk into a different lawyer's office on the lower floor. He was carrying a stack of papers, and he touched his neck 3 times before he went in. So I took the picture. I used Bo's phone. I already had it, because I was recording a bird for my project. Adelaide began to cry. Not for sadness. For the simple fact that an 8-year-old had seen clearly what an entire boardroom had missed for 7 years. She pulled Posey into her arms. Posey, still holding her notebook, whispered against her shoulder. "Don't worry, Miss Adelaide. My Bo is very good at fixing things that are broken." Weston stood in the doorway watching them. He did not speak. But in that moment, something shifted in him, and he decided. What he did next would not be silent. It would not be anonymous. He would put his own name on the filings. Corinne wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and said what she had been keeping in for 7 years. She had stayed silent because Thurman had been holding the expiring work visa of her only daughter in Mexico City over her head. If Corinne ever talked, the daughter would be deported and separated from her own infant son. "I'm ready to testify. My daughter is my problem." Weston's voice was quiet. "She's not only your problem. Hale Maritime keeps legal counsel in Mexico City on permanent retainer. Your daughter will have permanent documents before Friday. Your grandson will have a United States visitor visa before his next birthday. I will send the paperwork to your house tonight." Corinne covered her face with both hands and wept without making a sound. 3 days later. An emergency board session at Ramsey Coal. This time, it was not only the board. Outside counsel. 2 federal auditors with the Department of Transportation. A representative from the Securities and Exchange Commission. 2 agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation seated in plain chairs at the back. Adelaide chaired the meeting. She was no longer the woman who had sat at a pine table 12 days ago with a single overnight bag. She laid out the evidence in order. The forged addendum to the will. 3 years of Ramsey Coal route data sold to Calder Shipping. $47 million of corporate funds moved into Thurman's personal accounts through 2 shell corporations in the Caymans. Corinne Vasquez's sworn affidavit notarized that morning. The photograph Posey had taken, with metadata intact. The wire transfer records from 2 correspondent banks, subpoenaed through the SEC. Thurman tried to interrupt twice. Adelaide did not let him either time. "You had 30 years, Uncle. This is my turn." Weston sat in the second row. He did not speak at any point. When Adelaide needed a figure, he slid a page across to her. No words, no performance. The board noticed. Beaumont noticed most of all. Thurman stood up. His voice shook for the first time in public anyone could remember. "You don't understand. This company is in debt. I did what I had to do to keep it alive. The market collapsed in 2022. Calder offered a way to stabilize revenue. I took it because no one else was going to." Adelaide did not raise her voice. "The company is in debt because you moved $47 million out of it and into a personal fund in the Caymans. We have the bank reconciliation. We have the internal memos. We have the Calder counterparty statements. We have your signature on every document." The board voted 12-0. Thurman was removed as chief executive officer. The Securities and Exchange Commission moved to freeze his personal assets by emergency order. The agents in the back rose and walked calmly to the head of the table. As the cuffs went on, Thurman turned to Adelaide one last time. "You think your father would be proud?" Adelaide answered without anger. "He was proud a long time ago. You're the one who never noticed." Thurman was taken out through the side door and down the service elevator. The board convened a second vote the same afternoon. Adelaide was elected interim chair by acclamation. She accepted, with one condition entered in the minutes. Her entire compensation for the first year would be placed into a scholarship fund in her father's name for the children of dock workers at the Charleston port. Weston rose from his chair to leave. As he passed her place at the head of the table, he paused for 1 second. He spoke softly, only for her. "Your father told me once that you would do this one day. It isn't that I didn't believe him. I just didn't know it would look this beautiful." Adelaide did not turn her head. But when he was gone and the room had emptied and the door had closed, she sat down in the chair at the head of the table, and for the first time in many years, she let herself breathe. 3 weeks passed. The 90-day mark of the contract marriage was almost up. Adelaide had spent those 3 weeks at the Ramsey Coal Tower during the day and at the wooden house on Sullivan every night. She had restructured the executive team. She had walked the docks at Charleston Port in borrowed boots and stood on the deck of a container ship with the Longshoremen's Union representative for 2 hours, listening more than she spoke. She had personally called each of the 99 companies whose drivers had stood on Middle Street, and she had thanked them, and she had signed standing order contracts with 73 of them on terms better than any Ramsey Coal had offered in the past 5 years. The company's valuation had risen 18% in 14 days. At home, she had started cooking again. It was the first time in 6 years. Posey had been her supervisor, correcting her knife grip, explaining what a gentle simmer looked like versus a boil. Weston had watched them from the doorway and said nothing. Evening at the wooden house. Posey was asleep down the hall. Weston and Adelaide sat on the back porch with 2 mugs of tea. The ocean was flat and low, and the moon was a thin curve over the water. "Tomorrow is day 90, Adelaide said. "I know. Do you have divorce papers ready?" Weston set his mug down carefully on the porch rail. "Yes. In the top drawer of the kitchen table. Since the first week, I was never going to hold you to a piece of paper." Adelaide nodded. She was quiet for a long time. The porch creaked under their weight as the wind shifted. "And if I don't want to sign them?" Weston turned to look at her. The Sullivan moon put a thin line of light across half his face. "Then tomorrow we don't talk about paperwork. We talk about the strawberries Posey wants to plant along the side fence." She has a diagram. It involves 4 separate varieties and what she calls a rotation schedule. She laughed. A small, wet laugh. Tears came down her face without warning, not for grief, just for release. "Weston, I'm not ready to say that I love you. I know, but I'm ready to stay long enough to know that one day I might be." He nodded. He did not press. He did not ask her to explain. He simply accepted the sentence the way a carpenter accepts a measurement. This is what the wood says it is. You build to that. Inside, Adelaide's phone lit up on the kitchen counter. She went in and picked it up. Her attorney at the firm that had represented her family for 20 years. "Thurman has offered a plea to the United States Attorney. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he's willing to testify against Calder's executives and 2 of his own outside counsel. But there's a condition. He wants to meet with you in person before the agreement is signed. He says there's one last thing about your father that he's never said aloud. He wants to say it to you directly, with no recording, no counsel present on either side." "How long do I have to decide?" 48 hours. Adelaide came back out to the porch. The tea in her mug was already going cold. She looked at Weston, and she could see he had heard enough of the call to know the shape of it. "You can come or not. Either way is fine." "I'll come." The federal detention facility in North Charleston had a visitation room painted the color of weak tea and fluorescent light. The chairs were bolted to the floor. A guard watched them through a reinforced glass window. Thurman had lost weight. He had no suit. He wore the tan jumpsuit of a pretrial detainee, and his hair had not been cut. He looked smaller than Adelaide had ever seen him, and older, as if the months since the boardroom had taken years out of him rather than weeks. "Thank you for coming," he said. Adelaide did not answer. She sat down across from him. Weston sat 1 chair back, not close enough to interfere, not far enough to be absent. "There's one thing I never told you. Your father, before he died, knew I was taking money. He called me into his study on Saturday. He told me he would be reporting the full picture to the Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday morning. He gave me the weekend to think about whether I wanted to be the one to tell my wife and my sons before it hit the papers, or whether I wanted him to do it." Adelaide went very still across the table from him. "Your father died on Sunday. Stroke," the coroner ruled. "Natural causes." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I didn't do anything. I didn't give him anything. I didn't lay a hand on him. But I knew he had high blood pressure. I knew he was under stress. I came to the house that Sunday morning, intending to ask him to give me another week. I had a key. I let myself in. And when I found him on the floor of his study, already breathing wrong, already turning the wrong color, I stood there. For 15 minutes. I stood there and I did the math. If he lived, I was finished. If he died before the ambulance came, I had time. Then I called. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. The coroner told me the window for intervention had been under 10 minutes. Adelaide stood up. She did not shout. She did not weep. She only stood, and her hands opened and closed once at her sides. Weston rose and placed his hand on the small of her back. It was the first time he had touched her deliberately. She did not pull away, and she did not lean in. She simply held her ground with the warmth of his palm steady against her spine. Thurman went on, his voice smaller now, his eyes on the table. I'm telling you because I want you to know you were right to stop me. It wasn't the money, it was him. I let him die because I was afraid of him. And I've been afraid ever since. Of what he would say when I finally had to see him again, on whatever side of whatever door waits for me. I'm telling you because I can't face him. And I thought maybe, if I told you, he would at least know that someone who shared his blood had heard it out loud. Adelaide looked at her uncle for the last time. She did not cry. She did not sit down. She spoke clearly enough that the guard at the door could hear her. Do you know the difference between confessing and asking forgiveness? You just did the first. You didn't do the second. I'm not going to do it for you. My father would not have done it for you either. You wanted absolution, and what you're getting is a witness. That's the most you get from me. Your plea agreement is your problem now. She walked out. In the corridor outside the visitation room, she leaned against Weston's shoulder. He did not speak. He only held her up until she could stand on her own again. It took about 2 minutes. She counted. They drove back to Sullivan in silence. Weston kept both hands on the wheel. Adelaide watched the marsh grass move past the window. When they pulled into the shell driveway, Posey came running out of the house, hair flying behind her, dirt on her knees, a plastic trowel still in one hand. Miss Adelaide. The strawberries. The first one came up. It's red on one side and still green on the other, but it's definitely a strawberry. Adelaide knelt down on the gravel and pulled Posey into her arms. And this time, when she cried, she did not cry alone. 6 months later, spring in Charleston. In the backyard of the wooden house on Sullivan's Island, the strawberry patch Posey had planted now spread across a whole corner of the fence. Posey, 9 years old, sat on the porch step with a new leather-bound notebook, the old one already full. She wrote, Miss Adelaide has started calling Beau by the name Wes. This is the 4th time this week. Conclusion still pending. Adelaide carried a tray of tea out onto the porch. She had stepped down as interim chair of Ramsey Coal after the company stabilized and the federal investigations closed. She had handed the role to Beaumont and a new board chosen on merit rather than surname. She had kept her shares. She worked remotely on the scholarship fund and on a few maritime policy projects at a desk she had set up in what used to be the spare room of the wooden house. Weston was at the outdoor workbench repairing an old pocket watch, a Patek Philippe that had been in a customer's family for 100 years. He looked up when she brought the tea. Did you finish the call? Yes. Beaumont says the fund has awarded the first 12 scholarships, 10 for children of dock workers, 2 for the children of night janitors. He wants to expand it next year. Your father would be proud. She sat down next to him on the bench and set the tray between them. I signed the papers. Weston stopped working. He set the tiny screwdriver down very carefully. What papers? To void the original marriage contract. My attorney drew up a new set. No time limit, no conditions, no financial language at all. Just 2 names. If you want them. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up and went into the house. When he came back, he was carrying a small wooden box that Adelaide had seen 100 times on the top shelf of the closet and never once asked about. He opened it on the bench. Beneath a stack of Elena's old letters tied in a faded ribbon, there was a simple silver ring. His mother's. She had worn it for 42 years. I've had this for 8 years. I wasn't sure I would ever give it to anyone. Adelaide looked at the ring. Then she looked at him. Are you asking? I'm saying I'm ready to ask, when you're ready to hear it. She took his hand. Not almost. Not near. She took it, and her fingers closed around his fingers. And she did not let go. Today is a good day to hear it. Posey, behind the strawberry bush, let out a long, theatrical sigh that she had clearly been rehearsing. Finally, I've been waiting for 6 months. I was beginning to lose faith in the plot. Both of them laughed, and it was the first time in a long time that Weston had laughed loudly enough to be heard from the beach. Weston slid the ring onto Adelaide's finger. There was no second wedding, no hall, no guests. Just the Charleston sun at 4 in the afternoon, the smell of ripe strawberries drifting up from the patch, and an 8-year-old, now 9, writing in her notebook, Conclusion. My Beau has fixed the biggest broken thing. Down on the beach path, Reverend Finch, the only witness to the night they had signed, walked slowly along the tide line with a fishing rod over his shoulder and a thermos in one hand. He lifted the thermos in greeting. He did not call out. He only smiled and kept walking. Far across the harbor, 99 luxury cars had long since returned to their 99 companies. Contracts had become routine. Markets had settled. The shipping lanes across the southeast ran now through Adelaide's signature and through Weston's quiet, acknowledged partnership. But one old Bentley was still parked in the Shell driveway at the end of Middle Street. The one Weston kept, polished twice a year, as a quiet reminder of the morning he had come at 5:50 to bring her home.